Tā kiri ko te ata, kōrihi ko te manu, ka ao, ka awatea, tihei maurio. Ko tamale sāna ahau, te kai hautu o te ahu o te reo ki te tauihu. Ahu tia te whakaaro, ahu tia te kōrero, mai te kore, ki te pō, ki te ao mārama. What are the sacrifices both of you have made moving to Te Tauihu o Te Waka?
One of the sacrifices we've made is it's around whānau. And when I say whānau, I mean we've got whānau here, but for me, myself, a lot of this whānau is whānau that I've met being here because of, my koro's whakapapa to this side, to Te Tauihu. What I speak more about, the whānau that brought me up, the whānau that raised me, and my close connections there. Being in Te Tauihu, it's not the easiest place. Going home is not the easiest thing in the world to do. With tamariki and that, it's about a 12-hour one-way trip. When you take into account 2 hours to the other side to Picton, an hour waiting for the ferry, 3 hours on the ferry. And then,
sometimes longer now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Such a joy.
And and then you've got to stop for the tamariki, to give them a break. So it's roughly about 10 to 12 hours just going there and back each way. But then also with that, it's kind of sounds sad in a way, but it's also about having to prioritize what, for example, which tangihanga you're going to go back to, and it's not that you love one relative any less than another. For example, I went back to a tangihanga back home, took the kids up, and on our way back while I was on the ferry found out word came out about another tangihanga, and so you can't just turn a whole ferry around on your way back. But then in another case, weather was the factor. All flights got cancelled, so there's that as well. And also, my mother having a kanohi relationship with her moko, our kids. That's probably one of the biggest sacrifices we've had to, in my eyes, we've had to make as a whānau.
One of mine, which I didn't really think about, was once our kids were older, what experiences would they have available to them being away from whānau. That taught us, I, as a KKM kid, or a kura kaupapa Māori kid, our learning was completely different. It was very hands-on, and what I see and hear from my kids when they come home is completely different to what I grew up with my norm. It has now become a challenge for both of us to kind of balance our kids' upbringing with things that we had. Ka whakatauri te pēr ki te pukapuka. Ko te Māori kei te tei pukapuka, ko te Tauihu kei te tei pukapuka. Normally, te ao Māori, we're on different pages, but I roto I tēnei horopaki, we're on different books. Right? And it was a sacrifice that I now see that has become a challenge for both Aaron and I. Te mahirama tuna, te whakarauora i ngā āhuatanga o te taha ki te mātauranga, i roto i a tāua, a māua tamariki. Hei kati pia i how do you make aukati? Just kind of, pētaku kōrero pēr, kind of closing that, not circle. Like, here's a whole heap of gaps, we've got to fill it now. Hi ika, te kōrero mō ngā āhuatanga o te taiao, e whakātu ana i te wāpai, e tohu ana i te wāpai, kia mahi i tēnei, kia mahi i tēnā, te mea.
I think with that, it's like our upbringing was a lot different to our tamariki's upbringing. We were both brought up in relatively rural communities where, you know, eeling, te hiika, all of those activities were fairly easily accessible, and you know, for us, you know, we growing up in Ratana Pā, the church bell was the 6 p.m. church bell in winter time was our sign that we had to get home. During summertime it was like the sun's going down, yet cool, go home. We had all of that freedom. However, growing up here, you know, ki ro te taone nui ne o whakatu, you know, there's so many dangers within society that you can't control, whereas, you know, that whole whakatauki of it takes a village to raise a child, you know, that was very much you know, that was very much alive and well back when we grew up. We could just go to anyone's house, but here, you know, you can't just go to anyone's house anymore.
Talk to me about those villages, you know, Rātana, the Manawa Tūhoro Whenua, like you've said, they're different communities to the community that we live here in Nelson or even anywhere in Te Tauihu. So what was it like growing up in those villages, in those parts of the country?
Māku, in the last 10 or so years, some of the parents who were at the kura, I assume they were Māori. He harero Māori, he rukunua ki ngā mahi Māori. There was no ifs, buts or maybes. I found out that they weren't even Māori. I was like, wait, what? And on top of that, like, you could try and run away from your parents during your rebellious years, but they just call your parents and be like, hey, don't worry about your kid. I've got them. It wasn't me, it was a sibling of mine. Yep, I'll leave that there for those who know my siblings. He mātua anō. They weren't just matua so and so, whaia so and so. They were quite literally pillars of our homes. Ahakua mātauranga mai, ahakua whānau mai, ahakua hapori iwi aharane.
I guess for me, one of the biggest, I guess the one word I can use to describe my upbringing was freedom. You know, aside from your normal go to school, but like after school you just had freedom to roam, get up to mischief, and the mischief for us was things like, you know, go playing in the hay bales and on the rugby field, and you know, we didn't have playgrounds back then, so we made our own playgrounds. I remember some of the seniors at school, you know, being creative and making little quarter pipes with plywood and stuff, so they could just skate on them at school. But you know, just after school you could go to anyone's home, you could go down to the creek, play in the water, and you know, everyone treated you like their own child. You know, go home and, you know, go to someone else's, you know, whare to play, and then, you know, next minute they've fed you, you've had dinner, and just send you on your way home, and you go have your bath and go to bed. And it just wasn't a thing. But nowadays, you know, with our current society, and I guess it's you know, I think it's kind of a town thing, you know, with a whole group of people living together, not necessarily knowing each other. You know, that freedom just isn't there because it's been replaced by, oh, well, my kid's okay. Are they being bullied, or have they been attacked or anything like that? We just don't have that freedom, you know, that you do growing up in a small community.
Speaking of your small community, Rātana, you know, the hāhi plays a huge part of the life in Rātana Pā, and just wondered if you could give us an insight into what that was like for you growing up within the hāhi, and the influence it's had on you, sort of one in life, but particularly in terms of like your reo, because you know, te nuinga o ngā whakamoemiti I roto I te reo, or te katoa o ngā whakamoemiti I roto I te reo, nā reira, you know, what influence did that have on your reo, and even just the tikanga that you observe now as an adult?
Ko te tūāpapa o te hāhi rātana ko te reo Māori. That's probably as simple as that's one of the foundations of te hāhi rātana is te reo. And so growing up at kura, you know, we were taught reo, but you know all the way through school. Back in the days of School C, you know, our senior students were doing School C at primary school, and passing with flying colours. But I sort of grew up in around that generation around the time where Te Aho Matua was still being written into a Word document and given life at those sort of government levels. And so one of the things I remember was that our kura 1 year, you know, was a bilingual school. The next year it was a kura kaupapa. The following year it was a half kura kaupapa, half bilingual. And so that was all around the time when Te Aho Matua, around before Te Aho Matua had been had given this, you know, an identity to kura, to what we know as kura kaupapa Māori today. And after I left school, I think my sister was one of the ones that helped facilitate where the school, the status of the school now, which I believe it's known as a special character school, because of that rātana influence and that hāhi influence. And so for us, you know, whakamoemiti every morning, every night, every after 3 o'clock after school, you know, whakamoemiti for our kai, you know, that was a thing every single day. When the tangihanga was happening down at the marae, we'd all, as a kura, all go on down, pay our respects as a kura, go back up to kura, and you know so that hāhi formed the foundation of everything that everything that we learned. And we had your usual reading, writing, maths, hākina ki ngā hauora, and even, you know, stories of Māui and that. But you know, the foundations were within te hāhi rātana, and all of the teachings from that hāhi. And so we didn't, like I said, we didn't neglect any other areas like, you know, atua Māori and the stories of Māui and that, but the foundations were there in the teachings of te hāhi rātana.
I don't know if you intentionally went there, but there's some huge misconceptions around kura kaupapa Māori, around kura iwi and kura Māori, around what kids actually do at kura. You know, like I feel like there's this misconception that all they do is sing and dance. You know, they do kapahaka, and you know, I want to just know about your sort of upbringing in kura kaupapa Māori, Mana Tamariki is one of the most renowned kura kaupapa Māori across the country for, not just Te Reo Māori, but also academics. So I'd love to hear what your experience was in kura kaupapa Māori.
I was fortunate enough to have two kura kaupapa, the first being Te Kura Kaupapa Māori o Te Rito, based in Otaki. Their marautanga, I reckon, I don't know if that's the right word, was more to give a solid cultural foundation, and I mean culture as in ngā iwi e toru e noho ai ia. And I know this might sound weird, but for kaiako, instead of having like learning outcomes up here, imagine if you flipped it. So you would have something like the passion or the thing that the teacher is passionate about teaching, and then trickles down that way. And I know teachers listening to this will be like, well, it doesn't work. Well, actually it does. And so instead of you teaching what has to be taught, you're teaching something you're passionate about in a completely different way. That's kind of like when I'm doing lessons or anything, Aaron's like, you're doing it wrong. I'm like, no, I'm just doing it different. Leaning more on my passions. Yes, we do math, English at wharekura, science and all those other things that kura do. We just teach it in a different way. Māori kids are more hands-on, and I thank my parents for pushing the boundaries and giving us that to grow up with. Mana tamariki, yes, academic and cultural. Without both, I probably wouldn't ever be in where I am now. Going back to mana tamariki, it was hard. It was, i wero te pinati. Not saying Te Rito wasn't, that was just a different wero. It was nice to learn how to balance going from little old Otaki and how we work in Te Ao Māori to how do we transition that into Te Ao Pākehā, giving all students tools to have that transition. So once we get to, or if we chose to, continue to whare wānanga, that we would know things like time management and how to actually structure an essay without it being like X, Y, Z. This is so boring, but yeah, mahi te mahi. Switching things up, seeing the world from a different perspective. Without being in kura kaupapa, I think I would have found it very hard all the times I've gone overseas. I've been to nearby in America, Japan, and China, and Canada so far. With that ahurea aspect, I think without it, I would never have been welcome so naturally, or us and our family, by the people there. We were able to just like slot in. Instead of being like, what are you doing? What's that? Can I learn this? Just like taking a back seat. Oh. That's what I love, to be able to give our tamariki. Ooh, yuck, I just said tamariki. Sorry. Not just having a Māori lens, but it just being a normal thing. Te kite te ao, e ai ki tā, te ahurea. Yeah.
We're growing up here in Te Tauihu, it was sort of just sort of the norm, that you like ka kawe I rā haipapa nui and koe rā tō ao. And so it's interesting because you both talked about it, being in Tika Māori, you know your place, you know which part of the marae or the kaupapa that you are in. I guess, what are your dreams and aspirations for your tamariki in that sense?
The height is them stepping in to whatever haipapa we carry within our families. Currently, I think not I think, I know, my mum's trying to like pass on her karanga role to me. I don't want it. Nope, no thank you. Return to sender. Just because I know how hard it is, how time consuming it is. You know, ka mate te tangata, you know, that's my mum going on the next flight out. He Māori noa, ko te ao te Māori tērā. You know, the dead don't wait for people. Haere, ma haere tere atu. Just thinking about it. Ko ngengia. And her seeing a toll that it took on us. We don't see it, but she thinks she saw, well, she did. She saw the effects. And, you know, ka tōia i ngā tahairua. Do we follow that? Like my mum and dad, not dragged, but just took us with them to all the tangihanga, didn't matter rain, hail, shine, 2 people, thousands of people, we just went. And that's where we're kind of figuring out what is enough for them to be exposed and what's enough for them to know what happens at the marae and where they fit. Currently, I'm so proud of my girls. They love the back. I'm like, yes, I did my job. My one responsibility. No. And that's what I would like, but with our son, I'm not too sure what Aaron would like for him.
Ko tāku, kia tipu Māori ake ngā tamariki. E hara I te mea me tū ki te pai ki tēnā o ngā wāhi hei whakatūtuki I ngā tikanga. Pai te tū o muri, e tō tīta ora. Engari, ko te Māori ake e kōrero, ko te whanaungatanga, ko te manaakitanga, kei roto I ngā mahi katoa. Ka whakaarohia te whānau tuatahi me te manaakitanga tuarua. Kia riro I era o ngā āhuatanga ko tau au I roto I au anō. Ai, ko tika o maua mahi.
Raue.
Dino hōnu tērā whakautu. I hea tēnā. Kia mai tēnā ia. Tēnā pūkoro.
So ko kore mo ngā tamariki, and that's, you know, your dreams for them. What are your sort of dreams for the world that they're growing up in? You know, we're seeing a shift at the moment in the naturalisation of Te Reo Māori, of kaupapa Māori. But I even think it's too slow. I think, and so what are your dreams for the world that they're growing up in? You know, ka tupu Māori mai I roto I te ao, engari, what does that ao actually look like?
I would love all our tamariki Māori to just believe in themselves, know that your Māoritanga cannot be quantified. You know, you could be a whāngai and from another iwi, another culture. But when you are whāngai into a Māori family, you are then Māori. So, and as a whāngai, I think there's too much social pressure for us to fit in to this way of being Māori. He ua tira pātai. Kia mōhio rātou ko te ao Māori. Kei reira, ahakua ngā piki ngā heke, I roto I tōna ao. Ia e tipu ake ana, ka kitea, ka rongo ki o nā pau. Ia e heke ana, hoki atu ki au pau. Ki te tai ao rānei. E tau ai tō ngākau, tō wairua, tō harane. Hei aha ngā pai aru a te pukamata. Hari te mea mā tō kanohi koe e Māori, tō reo koe e Māori.
Kia au nei, e toru, ahura toru ngā pau ki tēnei mea te Māori. E kia ai he Māori koe. Ka tahi ko te reo, ka rua ko te tikanga, ka toru ko te ngākau. and we talk about the naturalisation of Te Reo Māori, it doesn't necessarily mean the naturalisation of tikanga Māori. And this whole thing with Reo Māori being naturalised, ka pai. One of the things that that no one really realises is that in order for that to be achieved, it's one of those things that's going to be a generation. It's going to be, and I mean, it's as simple as, we can say Te Reo Māori is compulsory tomorrow. Cool, we don't have the teachers to resource that. So what's going to have to happen from there is, okay, universities, teachers training colleges are going to have to go back and look at their programs, redo their programs. That will take a couple of years before then they can start taking intakes. The first lot of teachers, that's another 3 years after that. And so that's 5 years before the first lot of teachers actually start hitting schools. And then after that, it'll be another 13 years before
you see the fruits of that.
You actually see, enough teachers to resource that. And then so with that, that's 18 years gone. And so, another 7 years or so after that, when you'll actually start seeing the next generation growing up in, with the reo that's been naturalised. And so that's a generational thing. It's going to be a change that's generational. With tikanga Māori, it's different again. Where I grew up in Rātana, not everyone had the reo. Not everyone, but one thing they did is, we had our tikanga, whether that was tikanga Māori or tikanga o te hāhi, e noho tonu ki te reo. He ko tōna tua papa ki te ao Māori, he tikanga Māori tonu. So not everyone had the reo, but everyone still had ngākau Māori, and some non-Māori actually have ngākau Māori. So there's that. So there's kind of like 3 po to within, to that kind of make up what a Māori, or what Māori is. Your reo katahi, tikanga karua, ka toru ko te ngākau. And that's, manaakitanga, whakapono, whanaungatanga.
All the tangas.
All the tangas. And kei tō ngākau tēnā. So,
That was my last sort of hohonu question. And all of these kaupapa in with some quick fire sort of questions. Ka pai, so not too much thinking. Kaueruku hohonu. No. So, first one. Boil up hangi.
both.
Hangi.
Both.
Traumatised by boil up.
Puha watercress.
Both.
Both.
Okay, last one. KFC, TT.
KFC. Sorry. My entire family. It's just too salty for me. I can't handle that. In saying that,
Wicked wings, kia ora.
yeah.
Right. Yep. Hot and spicy, kia ora. Well, koina ngā kōrero mō tēnei rā, tēnā kōrua I nei wānanga a tātou, nō mātou, te whiwhi kia rongo I o kōrua ao, I tipu nei kōrua, o tira te ao e noho nei tātou ki te tauihu, ngā moemoea mō o kōrua tamariki. Nā reira, mihana kia kōrua, ka whakarihia te tapua ngā kōrua ki te pātu o tēnei whare, ka puta ki te whaiao ki te ao mārama. Tihei, mauri.